Thousands of Israeli troops continue to amass at the border with Gaza, as U.S. President Joe Biden warns that an occupation of the Palestinian enclave would be a mistake.
Demonstrators around the world have turned out in thousands to oppose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Poland seems to be taking a shift to the left after its opposition parties won enough votes in its national election to form a new government.
An 8,500-year-old Palaphite settlement has been discovered in Albania. It's believed to be the oldest in Europe.
Israeli troops continue to amass near Gaza ahead of an expected ground offensive. Supported by U.S. Navy ships in the region, these troops appear positioned for a campaign to dismantle the Hamas militant group. But U.S. President Joe Biden warns any Israeli occupation of Gaza would be a, quote, big mistake. So far, a week of intensive airstrikes have demolished entire areas of the Gaza Strip, but has failed to stop rockets fired towards Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who met with the families of people abducted by Hamas, has vowed to destroy the group. Roughly 150 people were taken by the militants last Saturday during a surprise assault on Israeli towns and villages. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is on a diplomatic mission in the region, is to make a last-ditch attempt to reduce the impact of an all-out Israeli land assault on Gaza. He's returning to Jerusalem for more talks with Netanyahu. Meanwhile, it's feared the escalating Palestinian death toll will rise dramatically, provoking intervention by the wider Middle East. With Israeli airstrikes continuing, and food, power, and medicines in scarce supply due to Israel's blockade, conditions for people in Gaza are worsening. Water is said to have been turned back on, but without electricity to pump it, the problem remains. Thousands of people have been evacuated from Gaza City after Israeli warnings to move south ahead of the offensive. Meanwhile, the population of Khan Yunis city has doubled overnight.
Around the world, thousands of demonstrators have turned out to oppose the conflict in the Middle East. While the rallies last week were in response to the atrocities carried out by Hamas militants in Israel, this weekend the gatherings, such as in Amsterdam, were more against violence in general or pro-Palestinian.
It's an inhumanity situation, and we are here standing for the right for every people, because every people has the right to have a safe life, to have a safe place to live, and to be safe.
In Rome, thousands of people gathered holding a giant Palestinian flag to show their support for the Palestinian people. In the Czech Republic, a rally was organized for a just peace in the Middle East. The organizers also backed Israel's right to defend its territory. However, they aim to honor the memory of all victims in Israel and Palestine, regardless of their origin.
Takže já tady nechci v tom veřejném prostoru, aby tady někdo zpochybňoval legitimitu toho, že Izrael brání svoje území, brání svoje civilní obyvatelstvo, brání svoje ženy a děti.
The conflict between Israel and Hamas has sent shockwaves across all continents, raising emotions and reinforcing community divisions.
A 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy has been killed in the U.S. state of Illinois in an apparent hate crime motivated by the Israel-Hamas war. The family's 71-year-old former landlord is suspected of stabbing the child dozens of times on Saturday and seriously injuring his mother. Over the past couple of days, U.S. police has been put on high alert for violent acts driven by anti-Semitic or Islamophobic sentiments. And the FBI has reported an increase in hateful and threatening rhetoric. Poland looks like it's taking a leap to the left, with 3 opposition parties appearing to have won enough votes to oust the governing Nationalist Conservative Party. Unexpectedly, the Third Way, one of the winners, sees itself as the broker for a new chapter in Polish politics.
Jest to dzień wielkiej zmiany, która następuje w Polsce.
Trzecia droga działa i wiele na to wskazuje, że będzie kotwicą demokracji.
The ruling Law and Justice Party took the most votes and should have priority in forming a government. But the opposition parties are already appealing to the president to skip that formality.
Apelujemy do Andrzeja Dudy o to, żeby dał możliwość tworzenia rządu opozycji, ale obawiam się, że łatwo nie będzie, bo prezydent, jeżeli będzie po stronie PiS-u, będzie bardzo to utrudniał.
Donald Tusk's Civic Coalition, Third Way, and the New Left ran on separate tickets, but with the same promise of defeating Law and Justice.
Tak, będziemy tworzyć koalicyjny rząd. To jest wspaniała wiadomość, bo to znaczy, że możemy zacząć naprawiać to wszystko, co zostało zniszczone przez ostatnie 8 lat. Edukację, ochronę zdrowia, kwestie mieszkalnictwa i kwestie praw człowieka.
Donald Tusk had declared it's the beginning of a new era for his country and intends to repair strained relations with the EU.
Stworzymy w ciągu najbliższego czasu nowy, dobry, demokratyczny rząd z naszymi partnerami. Polska wygrała.
Supporters of conservative parties were not visible on the streets of Warsaw due to the worse than expected results, but liberal activists did not hide their satisfaction.
Kończy się 8 lat niszczenia naszego kraju, niszczenia praworządności, wyprowadzenia nas z Unii Europejskiej. Myślę, że zaczyna się lepszy czas. Mamy konkretne oczekiwania do opozycji.
Where exit polls indicate that the opposition will be able to form the future government of Poland, Polish nationals will need to wait until Tuesday for all their votes to be counted. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Warsaw.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrives in Beijing today for a 3-day visit to China. It's part of a major initiative by Moscow to boost Russia as a destination for Chinese investment. Together with President Putin, the pair is expected to attend the third Belt and Road International Forum in the Chinese capital. Russia is becoming increasingly reliant on China to keep its economy afloat, but it is also trying to develop joint investment opportunities with developing countries.
As global temperatures continue to rise, droughts and water scarcity are no longer a rarity in Europe. 30% of the European population is already affected, with the UN focusing its World Food Day on water. In the coming decades, the situation is set to get worse and the agricultural industry hit hard.
Some of the food products cannot be produced anymore in southern parts of Europe because it's getting too hot.
People think that UK is a rainy country, but actually we've been experiencing drought as well, and places like this provide important agriculture for us.
The world's growing population, predicted to reach 8.5 billion by 2030, and a rising middle class are fueling the strain.
People in general, they are getting richer, and when people are richer, they are using more resources, not only water resources, but also land, and they eat more. They have more variety in their diet.
And other industries, such as the energy sector, are also set to be impacted.
As we move into a net zero era, a clean energy era, we're moving towards things like hydropower for sure. But if we have less water in our rivers, it means that we won't be able to rely on hydropower. And actually, we're turning to coal and gas, things that we consider dirty, still has to be in place if we are going to meet our energy demands.
In 2000, Europe introduced the Water Framework Directive to protect water resources across Europe. However, there is still a long way to go.
The measures that we are implementing needs to be a little bit accelerated at different scales, at the local level, at the country level, at the EU level, so that the level of preparedness towards these uncertainties will also be improved.
An 8,500-year-old palaphite settlement has been discovered in Albania. It's believed to be the oldest in Europe. It was found after a 4-year-long excavation in Lake Ohrid by Albanian archaeologists working with their counterparts from the University of Bern.
According to the carbon-12 data, this settlement belongs to the early Neolithic period, so it's around 5,800 years before the birth of Christ. So it's 6,800 years old, which makes it so far the oldest Palaphytic settlement found in Europe.
This settlement is said to have been home to between 200 to 500 people who lived in houses built on stilts.
In fact, it shows that civilization or better the settlements are really old in Europe, because so far the oldest settlements have been dated in small Asia and also Africa, and Europe was a bit late with datings. But now this shows that people have also been here, have been farming, have been creating their lives here, and it's earlier than we thought. So this is very important for the history of Europe.
Samples of the findings are now being analyzed at University of Oxford and are expected to provide important answers about the way people lived 8,000 years ago in Europe. In Lina, Albania, for Euronews, Borjan Jovanovski.
South Africa produced a superb performance to stun France in the quarter-finals of the Rugby World Cup on Sunday. The Springboks came from behind to end the hosts' 18-game winning run on home soil. Led by Antoine Dupont, the French pushed in the dying moments of the game, but it wasn't to be as the defending champions stayed solid in defence. Final score there 29-28, and South Africa will next take on England in the semi-final, following their hard-fought win over Fiji in Marseille. Steve Bothwick's side overcame a sensational fight back from the underdogs to secure a 30-24 triumph thanks to a solid performance from Owen Farrell. The winner will face either Argentina or New Zealand in the final at the Stade de France on October the 28th.